Economic Summit, the NTV ECONOMIC SUMMIT. And of course, this year's theme or summit is themed or tagged on the theme Key Policy Triggers for Economic Growth with Jobs. Now, you've had already that first interface or interaction with my colleague Samuel Setumba. Now we're still continuing with the discussions, anchoring on that particular theme. And I'm your host this afternoon, Charles Boji. And in the studio, I have Mr. Joseph Nkando from New Cafe. Mr. Joseph Nkando, you're most welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Charles.
Very good. Now, New Cafe is an association of coffee farmers in Uganda. And, of course, where he sits is both at the level of advocacy, but then business as well. So we'll pick a lot from him in this particular space. Now, going back to the theme, dear viewers, of course, we're talking about key policy triggers for economic growth with jobs. Now, many people have always said that the kind of growth, economic growth that we are posting as a country has, not been felt by the people at the grassroots. And again, some experts are saying that one of the ways to reach the person down there is agriculture. For a simple fact, agriculture employs 70% of Ugandans, and predominantly the youth. So, very fast, Joseph. From where you sit, do you believe that, without biasing you with my opening statements, that the kind of growth that we are posting as a country, is not really felt by the person at the ground? Because you deal with these people in the agriculture sector.
Thank you very much, Charles, for inviting me to be on this show. I want first to appreciate the fact that as a country that we plan, we put together strategies for the desire that we want to have as a country. And indeed, government has gone ahead to involve the private sector, the farmers, so to say, the ones that I stand with, to ensure that we effectively participate. And this has been done very well. So we have always, planned, as a country, to ensure that we move forward. And we have moved some steps, but as we move some steps, we tend to backtrack. And this is the real challenge. And the issues are to do with our basics. How do we ensure that we address the basics even before we talk about bigger things? The case in point here is, and I pay reference to the coffee value chain, where
you properly see.
I properly see it. Some years ago, we were able to work along with the government, and we came up with the national coffee policy, and which moved in a way that we had to go into strategy, and then the roadmap, the coffee roadmap. And we wanted even to move much faster to ensure that we are able even to have the national coffee law to address some basics within our means. What are these basics? The quality. The quality of coffee is very, very important, even before we talk about industrialization. Because what are we industrializing for? And what is that we are industrializing? Are you processing coffee of good quality?
Let me ask you on that particular point, because you brought in the issue of quality. So it's not just a matter of producing agricultural products.
Not at all.
Because, it's a fact that Uganda is an agro-based economy. I have already mentioned that about, over half of our exports are actual agricultural products. But there are always issues of quality and that kind of thing. So how do we then bring the masses on board, to appreciate and realize that quality is important so that they're able to derive good dividend from this?
We are doing our best to bring the masses on board. But what we are saying also is that there are certain things that we cannot do alone as individual institutions, but that collective effort is very, very important. What I want to refer to as a systems change, that what we are doing as an institution called New Cafe is complemented by, for example, a law that catches up with someone who tampers with the quality of coffee. But as we speak now, still the coffee law is not yet in place.
Okay.
These are some of the basics that are very, very important. So as we look forward to industrializing, we need to ensure that whatever is to be supplied is of good quality. Okay? Because we are not industrializing in vacuum. We are industrializing for customers who are very sensitive today. Their tastes and preferences have become so stringent that we've got to pull up. Okay? These are, you know, they sound to be so basic, but actually they are very, very important. Quality means money. Okay? So we want first and foremost to address the basics. Let us have discipline. And yes, some of us have come out to ensure that in an organized manner, as an association called the New Cafe, there is discipline. But again, those that are not part of us are not disciplined enough to ensure that collectively we are able to present something that will reflect the image of Uganda, because it is our mother country that we are, you know, projecting into the marketplace
and pushing out there.
Exactly.
Thank you very much. Viewers, just a reminder, this is part of the discussions for the NTV 2018 Economic Summit. Now, this year's Economic Summit is keenly looking at economic growth, the policy triggers to drive economic growth with jobs. And one of the areas we're looking at as being key, you know, to see us sit in that space is agriculture. And this is clear according to, you know, the recently published World Bank report, you know, the Economic Update report on Uganda, because it mentions the fact that in order, you know, to attain or get inclusive growth, the country has to invest a lot in those sectors, you know, that have the potential, one, to drive production and productivity, and then economic growth, but then jobs. And agriculture is actually hinted as one of those sectors that are key. Indeed, this the concluding financial year, last financial year, the sector, according to the bank, actually contributed quite significantly to the country's, leap from a bit of a slump we're facing in economic growth, somewhere around 3.9% to about 6%. So, and the key pointers here is that it was mainly because of exports, which we already know that 50% of them were agro-based, and then the other bit was the fact that there was good weather, and we all know this. We saw the bumper harvest in maize and several other areas and crops. So it's the reason why we are putting a lot of emphasis on agriculture, because of that unique position it occupies, you know, in Uganda's growth or aspirations to attain what has been termed as Vision 2020. I don't know whether we still, you know, in line with that, but at least there's been some leap.
2025.
And now we're looking at 2025. Good. Now, Joseph, to further propel or see economic growth, again anchoring on agriculture, we saw government coming up with a target of 20 million bags by the year 2020 for the sector where you see that is the coffee subsector.
That's right.
And we know that the coffee is one of the, actually it's the leading crop forex earner for the country.
That's right.
Do we have what it takes, for starters, to achieve that? And if we don't, what do we need to achieve that?
we do have what it takes. But how properly are we organized?
Yeah.
How consistent and focused are we in what we are doing? You know, across the board. Those are the questions that we need to answer. In other words, in whatever, where we have gone wrong, we need really to reflect on where we have gone wrong. We have not been consistent in what we are doing. We are not focused.
What exactly do you mean? Which areas have we lacked consistency?
Where we have lacked consistency is that we try to move forward, you know, for example, now with a number of policies that we have.
Yeah, that was a good
move. A good move.
Yeah.
But again, you have the policies, but they are not backed up by the necessary legal regimes that will hope to push forward.
Okay.
So in the process of operationalizing these policies, we are always, caught up, and then we are not seen to be moving. Now, yes, you have these policies, but without implementing them,
yeah, it doesn't help much.
Then you will not, achieve the growth that you desire to have. Okay? It is very, very clear that we have had rains just in the recent past. Do you think we will have rains in the next few months? What investments, deliberate investments, have we done to prepare ourselves in that kind of situation? So, as an example, and we know it very well, the trends are very clear. We have real mega trends we read about, we experience ourselves. For example, as farmers, we do experience them. And the mega one is climate change, and it is not about to go away, but we are not investing in a way that is supposed to invest at a rate much faster than the way climate change is taking place.
It's fast catching up with us.
So we end up planting coffee and any other crops, and they end up drying up. So where is irrigation?
I hear you. I'm sure we'll have very good answers. Viewers, we have in the Economic Summit later this evening, we're going to have policymakers, we're going to have members of the executive, and captains of business. It's going to be, a confluence of minds and ideas to really come out with, good ideas that can inform policy at the end of the day. So I think some of those answers are going to be answered in that particular engagement. But Joseph, I want to move on to the issue of industry, agro-based industry. If you talk to many people in the agriculture sector, they will say that most of the financials are a bit, risk averse when it comes to agriculture. I don't know whether it's more on the side of primary production, the garden, or on the side of industry. I know, besides being an advocacy group, Nucafe, you also investors in that space of agro-processing. How have you found it? What does it mean? How does it feel for someone to be an investor in agro-industry in Uganda today?
Yeah, that is something that is at the minds and hearts of many people who would wish to invest, in agriculture or agribusiness, so to say. But you find that the conditions, are not that favorable. And of course, people try their best to see how they can go around it. And agro-industry calls for, real skills. Because this country and many others in Africa are trying to transit from primary agriculture, where they have inherently had certain skill set, and therefore bridging now this gap to another skills set in terms of agro-industry is something that calls for even looking at our education system. That do we have those with the necessary skills to be able to bridge this gap? And merely integrating, it is not to leave alone the other part of the value chain, but to integrate it and get those individuals along the value chain to make sure that they are able to participate in more value added. Activities. So that calls for the skills set change, but it also calls for, of course, now we are in an era of technology. So those are key aspects to look at. And therefore we need to look at also this one in a very systems change manner, that let us not only look at in the agro industrializing and then forgetting
the source of
the source of raw materials
to drive the industry,
okay, and then the required skills to do that. And who is the customer? Who are those that are going to be employed, within these industries? And bearing in mind that today industrialization is about automation. It is about digitizing. And therefore most of our factories that we have, you find that because of automation, because of digitizing, very few people will get employed there. Now that is something that we need also to think about, that as much as we are thinking about agro-industrialization of any form at whatever level, the young people today are more interested in a way of using a phone, in a way of using a computer to operate work that was hitherto meant for 100 people. One individual
is doing work for one person.
Doing work for 100 people.
Which again brings us to our topic for discussion, or this year's theme, because we're looking at policy triggers, but in this space I think I'll look at activities now of the private sector to ensure economic growth with jobs. How do we balance between going ICT and embracing technology, which is of course a necessity, because you need efficiency to be able to compete, especially at the global stage. But at the same time provide the much needed jobs. That balance. Because I know this is a challenge that is beyond government. I believe it has to be done by both government and the private sector, investors like you. How do we get that balance? What do we need to do?
Very good. We need to think through this, and this is how it is happening at New Cafe. We are talking about inclusive growth. You have millions of farmers out there. It calls for us to look at business models. It calls for us to look at development models, which are able to ensure that the majority are part of this process. And this is why, as New Cafe, we are able to come up with what we call the farmer ownership model. A model that enables even a smallholder farmer that produces only 200 kilograms to be able to process coffee okay, at a much higher level. How does that happen? It means that very business model is compassionate enough that these farmers, they have been in abject poverty for a long time, and the only way for them to get out of this trap is to stop selling the raw commodities at the farm level, and then work within an institutional framework, transform that commodity into more value-added products, but when you are still the owner of that, okay, and therefore you are getting more into your pocket for reinvestment,
and it's trickling down more,
and it is trickling down to the communities.
So that then calls for I can see a lot of awareness and empowerment, because I can see, I mean, taking the example of coffee, and not just coffee, whether vanilla and all these other commodities, we can see that farmers, by the time that coffee ripens, they are desperate for the money.
That is it.
So it means that you need bridges in there.
That
you need
is
a financial.
Yes.
And of course you need warehousing, because sometimes you have these farmers.
True.
You know, coming up, you know, it's a bumper harvest. Like I just mentioned at the beginning, we had a bumper harvest in maize, and you saw what happened. At the end of the day, the farmer really didn't get that benefit.
Yes.
But then he also didn't have the time to actually add that value, because he can't keep. He's not aware. So I can see the number of, you know, interventions that need to come in. But from at your level, because I know it takes two to tango, like they say, and in this space we also know that government has been, you know, at a certain point been pushing the public-private sector partnership model.
True.
What are you doing on the ground? And I'm asking you not just as a person from New Cafe, but a person who sits in that space as an advocate of farmers, you know, rights, economic rights, and then as an investor in this space as well, as an organization. What are you doing to uplift or to raise this farmer to, you know, to see that they raise the bar and sit at that level where they can keep, they can add value, or maybe they can, you know, negotiate and own, like you say in your model?
Exactly. That's what I was, you know, pointing out. That it is that appropriate business model that you have to use, which not only caters for the few, but for the majority. And what I want to appeal to the private sector, to government, is to embrace a model that is inclusive. In this case, we are saying let us all embrace the farmer ownership model, because with this model, nobody other than the farmer that takes over ownership, even of a more processed, a more value-added product.
Yes.
The farmer still remains the owner, okay? And remaining the owner, it means you are getting better returns on investment.
I hear you.
Okay? A case in point, what we've done, enabling a farmer to move away from selling what we call chiboko coffee to selling graded coffee, the farmer's incomes improve by at least 250%.
Thank you very much. On that note, viewers, this is the 2018 NTV Economic Summit, and we're looking at policy triggers for economic growth with jobs. And again, the motivation for this theme is the fact that many have always complained that yes, we keep seeing numbers thrown at us that the economy is growing, but we don't feel that. And the feeling is that agriculture is one of the areas, if improved, if that potential is fully tapped, where that growth, once it happens, can actually be felt. Now, just to give you a recap of this, or to give you a digest of this, the Economic Update 2018 by the World Bank, of course, mentioned that one of the aspects or items that are driving growth, economic growth, which jumped from around 3.9% to over 6%, is actually growth in exports. And it also mentioned that over 50% of these exports are actually agricultural products. Then, of course, it talks about good weather. And once we talk about good weather in Uganda, we actually mean agriculture. We had good rains this year, and these all fed into the fact that the country was able to post that kind of growth that it posted. But we'll be discussing more of these issues in the Economic Summit, which is on this evening from 6 p.m. So make sure that you don't miss it. We have a panel of eminent people, researchers, business people, people from policy making organs for this country. So we're going to break down all these issues to see how the country can be able to attain growth, or to be able to craft policies or policy triggers that will ensure that the country grows and it's growing with everyone, inclusive growth, or which some people would say growth with jobs. And at this moment, we're going to give you, profiles of some of these people that I've just mentioned that are going to be with us this evening.
Muhumuza is a development economist with a PhD from the University of Manchester. He has been involved in development policy research, analysis, formulation and review for over 20 years, with a parallel teaching career at Makerere University, Nkumba University and African Bible University. He has undertaken assignments in public sector policy, both as a researcher and practitioner, carrying out analysis of socio-economic development policies, and participated in capacity building programs for Parliament, civil society and the private sector. From 2006 to 2014, he worked as economic advisor to the Minister of Finance, Planning and Economic Development in Uganda. His schedule involved managing trade-offs between politics and evidence-based policy making. Prior to that, Muhumuza had worked as a research fellow at the Economic Policy Research Center. He has also worked as senior manager at KPMG Uganda and Financial Sector Deepening Uganda. Muhumuza is a board chair of World Vision Uganda, a board member for Bank of India Uganda, member of council at Uganda Christian University, and member of council for Scripture Union Uganda.
Geoffrey Onegi-Obel, sometimes called the godfather of the Uganda security industry, Geoffrey is an experienced investment banker with clear skill sets in product development in the areas of bonds, equities and related instruments. Together with Governor Emeritus Leo Chibirango, he founded the Uganda Securities Exchange Limited with the support of USAID and the Bank of Uganda, and served for 10 years as chairman, during which he pioneered the regional cross listings as a stopgap solution to a slowdown in listings. Currently, Geoffrey and his team partners are working on East Africa's first regional cross-border exchange, set to trade exclusively in cross-border securities. This is also a response to a prolonged product drought on the East African exchanges, even more pronounced in Uganda. The East African Mortgage Market Initiative, a regional mortgage market initiative, is also part of the GCIFP team product pipeline. Hadija holds a master's degree in economic policy and planning and a bachelor's degree in statistics, both from Uganda's Makerere University. She is a fellow of the Association of Certified Chartered Accountants of UK, as well as a member of the Institute of Certified Public Accountants of Uganda. Hadija was appointed Executive Director in Ernst & Young, EY, effective 1st July 2016. She joined EY Uganda in December 2005 as a senior tax advisor. Prior to joining EY, she worked with the Uganda Revenue Authority. Hadija works in the tax department, serving clients in Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, South Sudan, South Africa, and Kenya. Hadija has advised several clients in different sectors on tax as well as trade issues. She has sat on committees for different umbrella bodies, including the Manufacturers Association in Kenya and Uganda, contributing to strategies aimed at improving improving the economic environment within which the manufacturers operate. Hadija has been a key technical facilitator and moderator at several internal and external EY and other non-EY events. She has also participated in different publications, media-related reports, commenting about both tax as well as economic issues affecting the country. She currently leads the EY East Africa Region Global Trade Indirect Taxes team. Patrick Ayota, NSSF Deputy Managing Director. Patrick Michael Ayota is the fund's Deputy Managing Director. He was appointed by the Minister of Finance, Planning and Economic Development on 29th October 2017. He was formerly the fund's Chief Finance Officer since 2011. Patrick has extensive experience in accounting and finance management, investment management and social security. He gained over the years in various senior management roles across different markets including the USA. Prior to joining the fund, he was the finance director at Barclays Bank Uganda. In 2017, he was announced runner-up Chief Financial Officer of the Year at the inaugural CFO of the Year Awards, which award was organized by the Association of Chartered and Certified Accountants, ACCA, and Deloitte Uganda. Patrick has been at the forefront of various projects in the USA and at the fund, which he steered successfully. Patrick has an MBA from the University of South Carolina, USA, and a Bachelor of Science, Finance from Liberty University, Virginia, USA. Patrick cites former South African President Nelson Mandela as his role model. Mandela understood the time and his role in that time. At the height of his presidency, he chose to walk away, for he understood that his role was to usher in independence and not preside over the nation. That is my inspiration, he says. Samuel Sejaka is a Ugandan professor of accounting and finance at the Abacus Business School. Between 1993 and 2014, he lectured at Makerere University, later the Makerere University Business School, and rose to the position of deputy principal. In December 2014, he retired from public service at age 50. He then helped establish ABS, Uganda's premier executive education institute. Sejaka is a partner in SNG Sejaka, Kawase and Company Certified Public Accountants, which is part of the SNG Africa Group. He founded the firm as Skill Consultants in 1988. He also serves as a director of Stanbic Bank Uganda Limited, the largest commercial bank in the country by assets. He is also an associate professor in accounting and finance at ABS.
Welcome back, viewers. Well, you've seen we really have quite a number of eminent people, eminent brains in the house for this evening. And like I mentioned earlier, we have the Economic Summit, which will be starting at 6 p.m. this evening. And the issue that we are looking at are the policy triggers for economic growth with jobs. And I believe with the collection of minds that we have in the house this evening, we should be able to come up with very good results that are going to inform policy. Again, as I mentioned before, we have policymakers in attendance. We have members of the executive in attendance, because we believe as NTV that this platform should be able to, channel those ideas to those that are supposed to, wrap them into policy for the betterment of this country and this economy. In the studio, again, this afternoon, I'm Charles Boji, your host. I have Mr. Joseph Nkandu, the Executive Director at New Cafe. New Cafe is the biggest coffee farmer organization or association in Uganda. It brings together all coffee associations in the country, and we're discussing agricultural industrialization. And we began right from primary production, the issues, unique issues that are afflicting the sector in that space. Of course, we looked at the processing a bit, and now, Joseph, I want us to look at the aspect of now manufacturing. You can call it processing, you can call it proper value addition. But I also know that at this moment in the country, we have people who can really turn coffee from its raw form to a finished product ready to be served on the table. Yeah. Maybe you can clarify on that. Is that right? Have we reached there yet?
Oh yes, we are making inroads in manufacturing products and coffee. Yes, we have coffee on the market that is 100% manufactured from within the country and served also from within the country. So we are demonstrating.
I hear you.
Yeah.
How does it feel like? I mean, what is the experience of manufacturing, so to speak, coffee in Uganda?
You know, to me, it's a very good experience, given our history.
Okay.
You know, from being just a producer country, now simply to grow coffee and export raw beans, and now to roasting the coffee and serving it locally, and serving the best coffee you can ever find anyway. You see? So this is so interesting. And we continue to ensure that we perfect in spite of the challenges that we have, for sure. But we are trying our best. People are trying their best. So this is why it is important to still continue look at manufacturing, that segment of manufacturing, still in a broader sense, that we should not lose track of where we are coming from, because the moment we lose track of that, then the inclusiveness disappears.
Because a bulk of the population sits
there
at the ground there.
So what this means is that compassionately we need to be still, you know,
looking at the guidance,
looking at, you know, that person who brought at the table this good coffee that I'm consuming, that what percentage of this retail or manufactured product is that person getting?
Good point. In terms of, if you to suggest, imagine you're a policymaker, what would you do for that person to actually matter in the coffee value chain or equation? Very
good. Number one, in terms of looking at what affects even manufacturing, the case in point is power. Electricity. Electricity is still very expensive. So a lot needs to be done to bring down the cost of electricity, because directly it is affecting that person I'm talking about, who is supposed to get the real share for further reinvestment. And this is why, because of what we have experienced for the past few years, we've been able to move into manufacturing to try to diversify our sources of power.
Which comes, of course, at a cost.
It comes at a cost, but we are trying our best. This is the beauty of Ugandans. That, yes, they are entrepreneurial and they try to survive. So, but even as we are trying to survive, there is a lot more that collectively, that in partnership, public-private, that needs to be done to bring down the cost
of power.
So, but I wanted to make a point that how are we diversifying? But and within a context of trying to become more resilient, in terms of trying to ensure that we mitigate and adapt to climate change, and therefore we are investing in renewable energy. You can call it solar energy, okay, whereby in the next several years, say 20 years, we may be able to, you know, juggle out between hydroelectric power but also solar power. And by doing that, that farmer because the farmer brings the coffee for processing
or his
at a cost.
Agricultural product.
Yes.
Could be maize or anything.
It could be maize, it could be anything. But now I'm talking about a model that enables this farmer to continue with the ownership.
Yeah, I hear you.
In other value chains, the farmer loses ownership immediately, whether it is maize, whether it is cocoa, whether it is cotton, immediately it leaves his farm gate. You see? But the model I'm describing now, which I would like other value chain to take on as we move into big time industrialization, into big time manufacturing, is a model which enables this farmer to sell a more value added product. There you are talking about inclusiveness now in manufacturing.
I hear you.
You are talking about women and youth benefiting. You are addressing a number of aspects, and that's why I said the basics are very, very important to address before we address bigger things.
I hear you. So you've mentioned power.
Yeah.
What else could it be?
Packaging materials. You know, and I like Ugandans. They have style. They elite. When you package your product very well, be sure a Ugandan will go for it. Of course, it's not only the Ugandan market that we are looking for. We are looking for international markets. Yeah? But the packaging materials are extremely expensive. How many packaging industries do we have around? We've got to import already made material from, outside. That is extremely, expensive. And if it is expensive, at who is it expensive? It is the farmer.
At the end of the day.
At the end of the day, it is the farmer.
Okay.
So these are aspects that, collectively, in that public-private or private, public partnership that we have to address.
I get you.
Can we go to the extent of saying, okay, from the public can put in this portion deliberately, private sector put in this portion, let us have that, the necessary equipment that does the packaging for the commodity that we know that it is not ending tomorrow.
I get you. Now, I want us to look at the issue of financing. I know to go into any form of industry or industrialization or manufacturing for that matter, you need resources and money comes in handy.
True.
What should we do as a country to address that? Because, like I mentioned at the beginning, it seems financiers tend to be a bit risk averse when it comes to agro-based investments. I don't know whether it's the same experience with manufacturing as well, agro-based, manufacturing engagements. But generally speaking, what do we need, to ease financing in that area?
First, for me, I appreciate whatever little that someone has done.
Yeah.
Okay? Our government came up with an agricultural credit scheme.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
And we need this to grow. To become what we desire. In terms of inclusiveness, this is where it becomes a challenge. Okay? If we are able to grow a fund as a country at affordable, interest rates for people to be able to tap into that fund, that is something that is, that would be good for this country. So that is one thing. The other one is to further still attract social impact investors into this country. Because
what do you mean
for
the purpose of our viewers, who are these kinds of investors we're talking about?
The kind of investors that we are talking about, those are compassionate investors. People who put themselves in the shoes of the kind of situation in which the smallholder farmer of maize, of coffee, of that this farmer needs to get access to this, because the funding that we are looking for could be of two ways. One intended for capital investments, but the other also intended for working capital. Okay? Because where do farmers lose the opportunity to add value to the agricultural product? Where? Slightly before or immediately after harvesting.
Okay.
Because they have their immediate needs. And what they have with them is that very agricultural produce.
It's the only thing that can save them.
It is the only thing that can save them. And therefore the best they can do is to lose it at that level. So the social impact investors, when they are attracted, because we've been only attracting, very capitalistic, capitalistic investors. These ones, it is only to their own advantage.
How do we get the social impact investors? I'm thinking, where should we look? Do we have them here? Should we build our own as a country?
That would be the best option, to build our own, such that, whether they are private individuals or even banks, then you can grow that fund.
And then help you. Now, in terms of comparisons, because, we operate in a globalized economic system. If you to see where we are today in agro-processing, if you look at our potential, because we keep saying we have a comparative advantage in agriculture because of nature's providence, by and large. Do you see us also maybe having the same when it comes to manufacturing? Or do we have potential to actually free that comparative advantage at manufacturing level?
Of course, it remains potential.
It remains potential.
It remains potential for the reasons that I have just mentioned. If you have expensive electricity, then how are you going to be able to manufacture a product that is competitive, that when you put it on the market together with the product that has come from Vietnam or Colombia, or I see coffees around. You see, in fact, that is another thing also I'd like to talk about, that why don't we really also as a country give preference to our own local products,
brands?
Yes, brands, put a much higher tariff on a product, because if Uganda's major product is coffee, and you are allowing it to compete with another product from somewhere, finished products on the same market, and yet those countries for a long time they did protect theirs until such a time when they had developed the muscle and then opened up.
Well, WTO will come down at you and say, you can't, that's protectionism and all kinds of jargons and the like. But I hear you, I hear your point. However, on the side of, the private sector, you yourself, do you see that level of seriousness? Do you see that level of commitment for Ugandans to go into manufacturing. In fact, someone was saying, I think it was a report done, where the feeling was that most Ugandans tend to feel comfortable in trading as opposed to manufacturing and creating things. Do you see that commitment and drive among Ugandans to actually go into that space?
Let me say this. There is a lot of commitment.
Okay.
But what I want to say also is that how is our approach we have taken? And that's why I keep saying we must address basics.
Go to the drawing board.
Who is that has moved into manufacturing?
Most likely is a farmer or
okay,
guy from down there.
Even, let's say, even into trading. And if it was the founder of that company that is involved in trading and manufacturing, after him, what has been the situation? This is why I go back and say, where did we put our family businesses with the succession planning?
Okay.
Before we jump into the corporate world of manufacturing, and we tend to think that we will be able to be sustainable over there, before addressing the little basics of family, businesses. Bearing in mind that 75% of world businesses are family businesses. Even those that have become multinationals, even Walmart, even some of the big, coffee manufacturing companies that we know in the world, they are family businesses. Okay? So we have tended to move more into a corporate world without a good foundation.
So we leapfrogged and jumped that stage.
Yes. And then those founders, those founding entrepreneurs of those enterprises, they have not had, the hand-holding for succession planning, that in case tomorrow he's even on vacation, or the Almighty has invited him or her,
his business doesn't go with him.
The business doesn't go with him.
Yes.
You see?
I hear you, Joseph, on that. And I know you sit on, several, should I say, committees or boards, especially at university level. Because what you're saying doesn't only end with succession planning. It's all about preparing people for responsibilities ahead.
True.
And it brings me to the issue of skilling, which you touched at the beginning. Do we have the right skill set? Or are we preparing the right skill set to really drive industrialization? Which, of course, in our case is agro-best, because it's what we know best. And if we don't, then what do we need to put in place?
Very good. As a matter of emphasis, because I have touched on this, as you have rightly put it, we need to rethink our education system. By the mere fact that education system cuts across all sectors of the economy, it has the biggest role to play.
Okay.
And therefore, looking back to what we have within our education system, and not only even at university level, but what I want to call the entire academic value chain, all the way, whether from kindergarten, primary, secondary, all the way to university. How integrated is our education system in view of what we have talked about in terms of comparative advantage? Because with that comparative advantage, our education system would have had a focus of now transforming that comparative advantage into a competitive advantage.
I hear you.
And then with the necessary skill sets, provided, because for a long time what has existed is, content knowledge. Content knowledge is like a raw commodity you are selling. You have the knowledge, but you cannot pass it on. You cannot put things in
place and say, this is what I've gotten out of the skill set that I have.
And that becomes a real challenge. The world does not mind at all about content knowledge.
I hear you.
It is what you can use that knowledge, and that is in form of skills, and have things done practically.
And that's manufacturing. Because manufacturing is a practical thing. You can't tell stories about it. You make things and put them there. Viewers, this is a preamble to the NTV 2018 Economic Summit. And this year's theme is anchored on exactly what we're talking about here. And of course, it's about key policy triggers for economic growth with jobs. Like I said at the beginning, the issue has always been that growth has been seen in numbers on paper. Many people would tell you we don't feel this growth in our pockets or where we stay. And of course, one of the issues that is coming out in this preamble discussion we're having is the fact that skills become key, but we'll again put these questions to the eminent brains that we're going to have this evening from the academia, research entities, policymakers, the executive, who are going to try and provide some of the answers. But most importantly, we expect the debate to inform policy for the betterment of this economy, for the betterment of this country. Joseph, on the issue, you've brought a very important aspect to the fore. Now, if it is the kind of education that we are giving our young people, because it pains when you go to a company or a manufacturing unit and it's filled with expatriates because the skill cannot be found locally. And yet there's demand for that same job locally. Where do we start? Where should we start as a country, to turn around that, to ensure that we churn out graduates or educated people, to encompass all of them, that are ready to meet the demands of the market?
Charles and dear listeners, it is time to stop the various constituencies of academic, businesses, industry, civil society, government being islands. It is time to stop, for us to stop as universities being ivory towers. Not anymore. We need to break down the walls surrounding academic institutions. We need to break down the walls surrounding industry. We need to come together on the same table.
And the walls in agriculture, sector down, primary production.
And listen to one another. And I'm happy things are beginning to happen. Many universities are scratching, themselves that no, we are being challenged. We need to listen to industry because that's where our graduates end up going to seek for jobs. So we need to interact
and be part of the growth trajectory.
Be part of the whole reform process of our education system. So what is happening, and I'm glad to mention that recently Uganda Matters University put up an advisory committee which comprises of industry, large private sector, civil society organizations, those involved in curriculum development, such that they can listen to the private sector, to the voices of the marketplace. What do you want? What are the skills that you want us to focus on? This is happening with Uganda Matters University. This is indeed happening now with Makerere University. And there are even incubators, with some of these universities. Why? Because they and us have reflected, on this as important. So this is good in the right direction, but we need to sustain it. We shouldn't get somewhere and then we relax. No. We need to really move on.
And what do we need to sustain that at the level of policy, at the level of private sector?
Of course, across the board. Because when I talk about listening to one another, because even skills keep changing. If you acquired your degree several years ago with the thinking that they are the same skills that you are going to continue with, and you are not getting back for refresher training, forget. Not necessarily that I'm talking about higher and higher degrees, and they are not bad, but in terms of skills that enable you to cope up with the ever-changing workplace, kind of skills that are required. So, and in this case, we are living, with artificial intelligence. This is why I talked about that, yes, we are yearning for industrialization to create jobs. But with the mentality that they are going to create more jobs for the ordinary kind of graduates. Not at all.
It's for those with the special skills.
With the special skills. And then how do you address the issue of inclusiveness?
Then that's how we become part of the growth story.
So that's why I'm saying, yes, let us be on the same table. Let us apply appropriate inclusive models. And this is where, in this case of wanting to uplift the farmers, because we are talking about agriculture, to get out of poverty by enabling them use the farm ownership model, participate in more value-added, segments of any agricultural value chain, get more on your investment, be able to reinvest, and that is it.
Everyone is happy. Well, viewers, thank you very much for being good company. Once again, I've been your host for this evening, Charles Boji, for this preamble talk show. It's a preamble talk show for the 2018 NTV ECONOMIC SUMMIT. Again, I have to remind you that our theme for this year's ECONOMIC SUMMIT is policy triggers for economic growth with jobs. And as NTV, we are committed to bring together all the minds in this particular effort or drive, so to speak, because the narrative has always been we see economic growth figures only on paper. We don't feel it. So we're trying to really, find out why is this the case and how can we get out of that. So please stay tuned. We're going to be live from Serena, and we're going to be picking the minds of different resource people on how we can really answer or undo this puzzle. Also to inform policy for the betterment of this economy and the country. So once again, catch up with us from 6. We'll be live from Serena, where we're going to be talking to these different brains to see how we can push forward on that particular theme. My host, guest this evening has been Mr. Joseph Nkandu, the Executive Director, Nucafe. It's been a pleasure having you, sir, on the show.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that good input. And at this particular moment, dear listeners, I will leave it at this. But again, keep it here. We still have a lot more with my colleagues at the conference center where this is going to happen and where we're going to be having this economic summit later on. I thank you and have a good evening.
Is brought to you by